the garden, and the distance at home. Daniel Harper had everything a man was supposed to want. A stately house that stood like a monument to success, a wife who wore elegance like second skin, and a career that earned him respect in every circle. Yet the silence inside those walls told a truer story. Each evening he returned from the city. The air felt colder, the rooms larger, and his marriage thinner than the polished smile his wife gave him at dinner parties. Victoria Harper was not cruel nor careless. She was simply absorbed. Her career in high-end real estate demanded charm, poise, and long hours of cultivation. Clients admired her composure, colleagues envied her discipline, and society praised her style. But Daniel, her husband of 12 years, rarely felt more than a supporting actor in the carefully staged play of her ambitions. Their conversations had dwindled to schedules, bills, and social obligations. Their intimacy, once fiery in their youth, had withered into a distant memory neither dared to resurrect. It was Victoria, not Daniel, who suggested hiring someone to restore the garden. The hedges are wild, the roses strangled by weeds. We should bring life back to it, she remarked one morning while fastening her pearl earrings. Daniel only nodded. He had almost forgotten there was a garden behind the house, though once, in brighter years, they had sat out there together with glasses of wine and careless laughter. When Elena Marquez arrived 2 weeks later, Daniel scarcely paid attention. She was younger than he expected, perhaps in her late 20s, with a quiet confidence that contrasted the nervous energy of most contractors he dealt with. Her clothes bore traces of soil. Her hands carried the memory of roots and thorns. Yet there was grace in the way she moved, as though she belonged more to nature than to stone. At first, their exchanges were brief. Elena would ask practical questions about irrigation, tools, or the layout Victoria preferred. Daniel, though polite, offered little more than necessary answers. But one afternoon, passing by a study window, he paused. Elena was kneeling among the roses, her hair tumbling forward as she brushed soil from the base of a withering stem. The garden had been lifeless for so long, yet under her care, something stirred, petals unfurling, buds daring to appear again. She smiled faintly at the sight of a fragile bloom, a private moment of triumph no one else was meant to see. That smile struck him more deeply than he expected. It was not dazzling like Victoria's rehearsed charm, nor distant like her professional poise. It was unguarded, almost childlike, as if she carried her own secret conversation with the earth. Daniel realized he had not witnessed such an unmanufactured expression in his home for years. Over the days that followed, he found himself lingering by the window more often. His work files spread across the desk, his phone buzzing with reminders, yet his eyes strayed toward the garden. Elena's presence filled the silence differently, not with words, but with an energy that reminded him of warmth he had long forgotten. At night, when Victoria returned from dinners or late showings, Daniel tried to explain what progress Elena had made. Victoria would nod absently, scrolling through messages on her phone, and murmur, "Good. It's about time the place looked alive again." Her attention never lingered. The garden, to her, was another ornament of status. To Daniel, it was becoming something else, a mirror of his own neglected longing. He did not yet recognize the danger of this shift. He only felt a faint pull, like the stirring of roots beneath soil long thought barren. Elena was not flirtatious, not forward, not even particularly talkative, but she carried with her a stillness that unsettled the emptiness of his days. One evening, as the sun collapsed into a copper horizon, Daniel stepped outside to find Elena gathering her tools. She wiped her hands on a cloth, leaving faint streaks of earth across her wrist. He hesitated before speaking. "The roses," he said softly. "I thought they were gone, but they're blooming again." Elena looked up, her eyes a shade of brown that caught traces of gold in the fading light. "They were only choked," she replied. "With care, most things can return." Her words lingered as she turned back to her work. Daniel stood there longer than he intended, his chest heavy with something unnamed. That night, lying beside Victoria in the vastness of their shared bed, Daniel thought not of the contracts waiting at his office, nor the social events filling their calendar. He thought of Elena's hands in the soil, and of her quiet assurance that what was choked could still return to life. It was a simple thought, but it unsettled him. For the first time in years, Daniel felt something growing, not in the garden, but in himself. Roots of desire. The days slipped by with the rhythm of pruning shears and watering cans. Daniel told himself his interest in the garden was practical, that he wanted to see the progress for which he was paying. Yet each morning he lingered by the windows, his gaze drawn to Elena's patient movements. She seemed untouched by haste, working as though every stem deserved her undivided care. Victoria noticed only in passing. Her schedule brimmed with showings and luncheons, with clients whose wealth demanded flattery and constant presence. At dinner, she recited deals closed and contracts signed, her voice animated for the first time all day. Daniel listened, offering polite nods, but his mind wandered. He no longer remembered the last time she asked him about his own work, his own thoughts. Their lives ran parallel, like train tracks that never intersect. One late afternoon, he stepped outside while Elena was gathering clippings into a basket. The air carried the scent of cut grass, mingled with the faint perfume of blooming lilies. "You've brought life back," Daniel remarked, his voice quieter than intended. Elena glanced up. Nature always returns if given the chance. He studied her, the sun catching loose strands of her hair, and found himself asking, "Do you believe people can return to?" The question surprised even him. Elena paused, then answered carefully, "Yes, though sometimes they must want enough to tend what they've neglected." The words struck him deeper than she could have guessed. He wanted to ask more, but Victoria's car pulled into the driveway, her phone pressed to her ear. Elena excused herself with a polite nod, slipping through the garden gate, leaving Daniel with silence heavier than before. The pattern continued. Small exchanges stretched into quiet conversations. Elena spoke of her childhood in a rural town, of her grandmother who taught her the language of plants. Daniel shared fragments of his own past. University days filled with ambition, early years of marriage when he and Victoria traveled without worry. Their words were simple, yet between them grew an intimacy he had not felt in years. It was not only what they said, but how they looked at one another. A glance that lingered too long, a brush of hands when passing tools, a silence that pulsed with unspoken thoughts. Daniel knew the line he approached, and yet each day it blurred further. One evening, Victoria rushed out to a gala, her dress shimmering like glass, her perfume trailing behind her as she kissed Daniel on the cheek without looking at him. He remained home, restless, pacing between rooms that felt hollow. Drawn outside, he found Elena still working under fading light, her hands busy with ivy clinging stubbornly to the stone wall. "You don't have to stay so late," Daniel said. "I don't mind. The garden doesn't keep hours," she replied with a faint smile. Something in her calm presence unraveled him. He leaned against the wall, watching her fingers free the ivy. "You seem content here," he murmured. She paused, looking at him with steady eyes. Contentment comes from noticing small things others overlook. He felt the truth of her words like a weight pressing on his chest. For years, he had overlooked too much, perhaps even himself. A silence stretched, thick with meaning neither dared name. The evening air cooled, and a single star emerged in the indigo sky. Daniel forced himself to speak, his voice rough. "You've changed this place more than I expected." Elena lowered her gaze, her hands stilling on the ivy. Perhaps the garden was ready to change. It only needed someone to see it. Their eyes locked, and for a moment, the world narrowed to the space between them. Daniel's heart thudded with a force that unsettled him. He wanted to step closer, to close that space, but restraint held him. Elena broke the moment, gathering her tools. "I should go," she said softly. He nodded, though every fiber of him wanted her to stay. As she disappeared through the gate, Daniel stood alone beneath the twilight, his pulse unsteady. Inside, Victoria's perfume lingered faintly in the empty hallway. Daniel inhaled, but it filled him with nothing. He thought of Elena instead, her quiet wisdom, the soil on her hands, the way her presence stirred something long dormant within him. That night, as he lay awake beside his wife, Daniel admitted silently what he had been denying. He was no longer merely admiring Elena's work. He was drawn to her, dangerously so, and though he told himself he could control it, deep down he knew desire had already taken root. The forbidden bloom. Rain fell in steady sheets against the glass, a sound both soothing and restless. Daniel stood by the window, watching water streak the garden. The roses bent beneath the downpour, their delicate petals trembling yet refusing to break. Elena was there, her figure moving swiftly beneath the canopy she had set up, rescuing fragile pots from the storm. Instinct pulled him outside. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of wet earth. His shirt clung damply to his skin as he hurried across the lawn. "You'll be soaked," he called, though his voice barely rose above the rain. Elena turned, strands of hair plastered against her cheeks. "It's fine," she replied with a laugh, breathless but unbothered. "I've weathered worse." He reached her side, helping lift a planter to safety. Their hands brushed, slick with rain, and for a moment neither pulled away. The storm raged around them, yet the louder storm was the silence between their eyes. "Come inside," Daniel urged. "You'll catch cold." She hesitated, then nodded. Inside, the house felt warmer than it had in years. Elena removed her gloves, her hands raw from the damp, and Daniel offered towel. She accepted it, but their fingers lingered in contact longer than necessary. The moment stretched, fragile as glass. "Thank you," she whispered, drying her hands. Daniel swallowed. He had rehearsed restraint countless times, telling himself he would not cross the invisible line that tethered his loyalty. But as Elena looked up, her eyes soft yet searching, his resolve thinned. "You shouldn't be here this late," he murmured, though he made no move to send her away. "I'll go soon," she replied, but her tone lacked urgency. Silence filled the room, heavy and trembling. He saw droplets of rain sliding down her arm, the curve of her shoulder beneath damp fabric, the quiet strength in her stillness. She was not adorned like Victoria, not polished for show, yet she seemed infinitely more present. "Daniel," she said softly, almost warning him, "this is dangerous." "I know," he admitted, his voice cracked with the weight of years unsaid. "But I feel alive with you. Do you know how long it's been since I felt that?" Her breath caught, her eyes closing briefly as if fighting herself. When she opened them, something had shifted, a surrender, or perhaps an acceptance of what had always been inevitable. The distance between them dissolved. His lips found hers in a kiss hesitant at first, then urgent, carrying years of buried hunger. It was not wild, but desperate, like two parched souls finding water after endless drought. The towel slipped from her hands to the floor. When they finally broke apart, both trembling, the room felt different, charged, dangerous, yet alive. Elena pressed her forehead to his chest, her voice low. "This will change everything." "Everything was already changing," Daniel whispered. They did not speak of Victoria, nor of consequence. For one suspended night, they allowed themselves to exist only in the space they created, two people clinging to a fragile, stolen freedom. Later, when the storm quieted and the air grew heavy with stillness, Elena prepared to leave. Her eyes glistened with conflict. "We can't keep this," she said, though her tone betrayed no certainty. Daniel wanted to protest, to promise, but he only managed, "I don't know how to stop." She turned away, pausing at the doorway. "Neither do I." When the door closed behind her, Daniel stood alone in the silence, his heart pounding with equal parts exhilaration and dread. He knew the boundary had been crossed, and there was no returning to the innocence of quiet conversations and lingering glances. That night he lay awake beside Victoria, every detail of Elena alive in his memory. The taste of rain on her lips, the trembling warmth of her touch, the confession hidden in her silence. His wife slept soundly, unknowing, while his conscience twisted between guilt and a longing too fierce to deny. For the first time in years, Daniel felt both alive and afraid. The garden outside glistened under moonlight. Every leaf beaded with rain, and he wondered if anything could grow in the shadow of betrayal. The truth settled heavily in him. What began as admiration had become desire, and desire had now bloomed into something neither he nor Elena could easily uproot. And as he closed his eyes, he realized the storm had not ended. It had only just begun. The harvest of choices. The garden flourished under Elena's care, its colors brighter, its scents richer, as though the earth itself conspired to celebrate her presence. But with every bloom came a tightening of the knot in Daniel's chest. What had begun as secret glances and stolen moments had become a bond he could neither deny nor escape. Victoria, perceptive though distracted, began to sense a shift. She studied him over breakfast one morning, her polished nails tapping the rim of her coffee cup. "You seem distant lately," she said casually, though her eyes narrowed with suspicion. Daniel forced a smile. "Work's been heavy, deadlines piling up." She nodded, but her gaze lingered. Later that day, she discovered a long strand of dark hair clinging to the collar of his jacket. She plucked it free, holding it between manicured fingers, her expression unreadable. That evening, Daniel walked the garden with Elena. The sun dipped low, casting amber light through the leaves. Elena's hands brushed a lavender stalk, releasing its calming scent, though her voice carried only unease. "This can't last," she murmured. He turned sharply. "Don't say that." Her eyes lifted to meet his. "Daniel, your wife isn't blind. She feels the distance. Sooner or later, this will destroy more than it heals." He wanted to protest, to promise her permanence, but the words caught in his throat. He could not deny the truth. His marriage, already frail, now trembled on the edge of collapse. Yet the thought of losing Elena filled him with a fear deeper than guilt. "I can't go back to how things were," he confessed. "Not after you." Her hand found his, fingers entwining with quiet desperation. "And I can't keep being a shadow in your life." The silence stretched, filled with the soft hum of insects and the distant call of a bird. It was beautiful, but it was also unbearable. Two hearts caught in a net woven of longing and consequence. Days later, Victoria confronted him. She stood in the doorway of his study, her posture rigid. "Is there something you need to tell me?" Daniel looked up from his desk, the weight of her question pressing against his chest. "What do you mean?" Her lips curved into a tight smile. "You've been distracted. You hardly speak to me anymore. When you do, your mind is elsewhere." "I know that look, Daniel. I've seen it before, just never directed away from me." He felt his throat tighten, yet no confession escaped. Instead, he said nothing. And in his silence, Victoria seemed to hear everything. She left without another word, her heels striking the floor like a gavel. That night, Daniel sought Elena, unable to bear the walls of his home. He found her in the garden, trimming back roses, her expression weary. The moon lit her face, soft and pale, yet her eyes held turmoil. "Victoria knows," he said, his voice raw. Elena lowered the shears. "Then this must end." "No," he whispered, stepping closer. "Don't say that. You're the only thing that feels real anymore." Her breath trembled, her resolve wavering. "Daniel, love can't survive in shadows. We've planted something, yes, but can it grow without light?" He closed the distance, pulling her into his arms. Their embrace was fierce, desperate, as though both knew the night might be their last. Every heartbeat thundered with unspoken truths. When they parted, Elena's eyes glistened. "If you want me, truly want me, you must choose. Not tomorrow, not someday. Now." Her words carved into him. Between the wife he had built a life with and the woman who awakened his soul, he stood torn. The garden seemed to hold its breath, awaiting his answer. But none came. Instead, Daniel pressed his forehead to hers, whispering, "I don't know how to let go of either of you." Tears slipped silently down Elena's cheek. She stepped back, placing the shears gently on the ground. "Then I'll choose for both of us." She turned, walking through the gate without looking back. The night swallowed her figure, leaving Daniel alone among the roses. Behind him, the house loomed in silence. Inside, Victoria's shadow passed by the upstairs window. He wondered if she watched, if she already knew the depth of his betrayal. The garden, once barren, now bloomed wildly around him. Yet Daniel felt only emptiness, as if the life growing outside mocked the ruin within. He sank onto the damp bench, burying his face in his hands. Elena's words echoed, "Love can't survive in shadows." And he understood, too late, that some things can bloom beautifully yet never belong in the same soil.